In today's khutbah, I would like to talk about the situation of the Shias in Indonesia. Last month, in a city known as Bandung in the West Java province of that country, an anti-Shia national alliance rally was organized in a mosque by some of the Muslim organizations, a number of them, all coming from the Salafi Wahhabi background. And based on the reports which have been circulating from Jakarta, Globe, and other sources, one of the speakers representing a group of that alliance, and it's interesting that the name of that group is Anti-Heresy Front. This is a group which deals with what they call murtad or heresy. And the head of that organization talked there about that in Indonesia must be cleansed of Shia teachings. And in his words, it's time that we declare jihad against them. So we are talking about declaring jihad against the Shias. When you look at the numbers of Shias there, in a country which has 250 million people, the number of Shias is only around 3 million, which makes it, a very small minority. 7% maybe. And so you start wondering what's going on in a country which has so many, such a large proportion of the Sunnis. Why are they afraid of such a small group? And this is where we come to realize that it has nothing to do with Shia theology, Shia beliefs, or Shia practices. Many times we actually start accusing ourselves that this is happening because this is what we do and this is what they say. No, it's not. There's nothing to do with the Shia theology or Shia practice. It has everything to do with politics. Just today in Indonesia, there are elections there taking place for the members of the parliament there. And the anti-Shia National Alliance, which was this gathering happened in the last 10 days of April, actually their purpose was to deal with this issue. And they were urging their followers not to support the kind of a democratic liberal party where, the governor of Jakarta is going to be the hopeful president in this election. And the reason why they are opposing that party is because that party has nominated a top Shia personality in the West Java area as their candidate. That's the problem. It's not that they are, Shia theology is an issue or Shia practice is an issue, because that party has, chosen a Shia personality to stand up as their candidate in that region. This is where they don't like. And this individual who has been selected by this Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle is Dr. Jalaluddin Rahmat, who previously headed an organization known as Ijabi, which is an umbrella group of the Shia organizations in Indonesia. And one of the Salafi clerics in that gathering actually refers to this issue, where he says that, he's asking his followers to vote against the Democratic Party because if its candidate became the president, then Jalaluddin Hikmat, the Shia, will be made the religious affairs minister. This is what they don't like. While it's just, fear-mongering that they are doing this, in his words, as long as we are not in power, the Salafis, we will never be able to purge the Shias. We need to strengthen our political base. The ruling coalition must be controlled by Islamic parties. And this is where we see, it's more to do with the issue of politics. And in Indonesia, although the Shias are very few in numbers, The persecution has been going on. In the year 2012, a Shia leader was taken to court with the alleged crime of blasphemy. What? Oh, he's teaching his students that Quran is not the original revelation. You know, the same propaganda that they have against the Shias, that the Shias have a different Quran, you know. And the way the process went on in that court, he was basically sentenced to 2 years in prison for blasphemy. And then other clerics in that region created this mob scene where a Sunni mob went into a Shia neighborhood. They burned the houses of the Shias there, where 2 of them were killed, and the rest had to flee that neighborhood. And they are still, till now, they're actually living as refugees in a stadium about 100 kilometers away from their neighborhood. And so this is where we see that the pattern always has been, as long as Shias are docile and quiet, don't speak for their own rights, they are good citizens. And you will see this pattern everywhere. If you look at Lebanon, the history of the modern Lebanon, as before Imam Musa Sadr, the Shias were right at the bottom when it came to sharing their national resources and the budget and even the power structure. But their numbers were increasing. This is where in the 50s, Imam Musa Sadr comes in, brings about this socio-political awakening among the Shias of Lebanon, and that's where they started to speak for their own rights. Even now, they are not really asking for the power in proportion to their numbers. They're still willing to, have peaceful coexistence with the Sunnis and the Christians in Lebanon. But as long as they were docile, nobody talked about them. When they started to talk about their own rights, now they are radicals, they are terrorists, they are fanatics. Look at Iraq. The largest number between, if you look at racial line, Kurds and Arabs or Shia and Sunni divide, the Shias are the largest group. And when they were controlled by others, they didn't really say anything, they were okay. Nobody talked about them. Then things changed in Iraq. Democratic elections took place, and that's the game of numbers. And a majority Shia-led government came to power. This was not something acceptable by the Arab rulers, so you saw Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, everybody. Using their own resources to destabilize the situation, even now. Bahrain, majority Shia. When they were docile and quiet, whatever happened to them, they were, nobody really cared about them. As soon as they started speaking in a very peaceful manner, they are suppressed. And so when we look at this issue, it's not really that they are radical or heretic or here and there. Even in the situation in Lebanon, it has everything to do with politics. Maybe what we can do as fellow Shias, far away from them, is at least drop down, a short paragraph, very polite, to the Indonesian embassy, just raising this concern about this kind of, hatred which is going on against a minority there. Of course, that was not organized by the government, but the government is basically ultimately responsible for peace and order in that country. And so it should be very politely worded, this is a matter of concern as far as, other Muslims in other parts of the world is concerned. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His blessings on the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen wherever they are, and may He keep them under His protection, inshallah. إن أحسن الحديث كتاب الله العزيز بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوبة وهو الغفور الرحيم ونشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف للعباد بجوده والعواد على المذنبين بحلمه ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين والشفيع المذنبين ورحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله الداعين إلى سبيل الله بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة قادة الأمم وأولياء النعمة ومعدن الرحمة أوصيكم عباد الله بالتوبة ما سلف من ذنوبكم. This mentality that we see, whether it's in Indonesia among the Salafis, where it first time emerged very openly in case of the Taliban in Afghanistan and then in Pakistan. You know, sometimes they do not realize that their own followers would even become more extreme than themselves. And the most distorted form of this mentality is emerging now in Nigeria in the name of Boko Haram. You know, we are told that they believe Western education is haram, more so for women and children and girls. It's double haram. And they go to the extent of, you know, kidnapping almost 300 girls and threatening to sell them as slaves in the name of Allah. Na'uzubillah. You know, when you think about it, Boko Haram, I think they are embodiment of haram themselves. They are actually the filth on this earth, deserving nothing but to be destroyed. They do not speak for Islam. There is nothing remotely similar to these ideas, neither in the Quran and the Hadith, or the history of the Muslims, Shia and Sunni alike. There is nothing like that. And they do not speak for Islam, and alhamdulillah, you know, media has been somewhat careful this time, that they are not, you know, using the wide brush to portray the whole Muslim world and Islamic faith on this issue. And the pity is that you have Nigeria as one of the regional powers in that continent, economic power, military force, and they have not been able to deal with this, the curse that they have. And, you know, people here in the western part of the world would be celebrating, remembering their mothers on Mother's Day. Our prayers is that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring these girls back to their mothers. Because this is, you know, if you really want to understand the pain of what is going on, look at Amir al-Mu'mineen. In Kufa, he used to, after the events of Siffin, where the battle was ended up, he was forced into arbitration, which was inconclusive. And then he would urge the people of Kufa again to get ready to deal with the problem of Muawiyah. If it's summer, they will say it's very hot. When he says that to them in winter, they say it's very cold. They had one excuse or other not to get ready for dealing with the army of Muawiyah. In one of the khutbahs, which is khutbah number 27, he says something. And this is, remember, these are people in Nigeria claiming to be Muslims, doing that in the name of Islam, in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have a similar situation where Amir al-Mu'mineen says, لقد بلغني أن الرجل منهم كان يدخل على المرأة المسلمة والأخرى الموحدة. He says, do not you realize what Muawiyah and his people are doing? He says some of their, armed men have already entered in so-and-so area. He mentions that. They have killed the chief of that area, and I have been told that the men among those would go into the houses of the people, al-mar'a al-muslima, and they would go to a Muslim woman or a non-Muslim woman who is under protection of the Islamic rules. فَيَنْزِعُوا حِجْلَهَا وَقُلْبَهَا وَقَلَاعِدَهَا, and they will snatch her ornaments from her body, from her ears, from her neck, from her hands, from her feet. مَا تَمْتَنِعُ مِنْهُ إِلَّا بِالْإِسْتِرْجَاعِ. She couldn't stop that, but she would just say, إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Amir al-Mu'mineen was very much hurt when he heard this. This is not only about al-mar'a al-muslima, a Muslim woman. He says this also applies to a woman who was from non-Muslim faith, but under the protection of the Muslim rule. And this happens, he says at the end, وَلَوْ أَنَّ إِمْرَأً مُسْلِمًا مَاتَ مِنْ بَعْدِهَا هَذَا أَسَفًا مَا كَانَ بِهِ مَلُومًا. If a Muslim man hears about this tragedy, where the sanctity of a woman is violated in this way, and even though he cannot do anything, but he feels so sad that he dies with that sadness, Ali says, I will not blame him for what happened to him. And this is what we see. Unfortunately, centuries have passed away. But it seems Muslims have lost that spirit of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet and the Seerah of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المتقين وأمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله عليه وعلى سيدة النساء العالمين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى سيد شباب أهل الجنة الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء عليهم الصلاة والسلام اللهم صل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام اللهم صل على مولانا الحجة بن الحسن صاحب العصر والزمان ما حاصر البذل والطغيان هادم أمنية الشرك والنفاق حاسد فرو البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام ما اتصلت الليالي والأيام اللهم عجل فرج وصح المخرج واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون